So all this jargon came later. The New York Times called later and said, did you just build the world's first peer-to-peer grid? I said, I don't know what that is, but I can tell you what we did, right? The rooftops in Dhaka we see are not built to power our lives. They are built to comply with the building code. Why Bangladesh was so successful? Because it has the best batteries.
Okay.
It was the notion of poor people don't need cheap products. They need high quality products made affordable.
Hey guys, আজকে আমরা কথা বলছি with Sebastian Groh. 2014 সালে জার্মানি নাগরিক বাংলাদেশে এসে একটা কোম্পানি শুরু করে, যেটার নাম হচ্ছে SOLShare. SOLShare নিয়ে আপনারা হয়তো অনেকে পরিচিত না। খুবই সংক্ষেপে এন্ড একটু অ্যাকুরেটভাবে যদি বলি, তারা সোলার এনার্জি নিয়ে কাজ করে। রুরাল বাংলাদেশে মানুষজন যেন সোলার এনার্জির মাধ্যমে নিজেরা পাওয়ার পায়, ইলেকট্রিসিটি পায়, এবং সেই ইলেকট্রিসিটি যদি বেঁচে যায় তাহলে আরেকজনকে শেয়ার করে টাকা ইনকাম করতে পারে। এই সিস্টেমটা ওরা বানাইছে। এর বাদেও ওরা এখন ইলেকট্রিক ভেহিকলস, তার মানে মিশুক, অটো রিক্সা, এগুলোর সাথে কাজ করছে। সেবাস্টিয়ান হিমসেলফ হ্যাড আ প্রিভিয়াস লাইফ of an investment banker. সেই ইনভেস্টমেন্ট ব্যাংকিং ক্যারিয়ার বাদ দিয়ে বাংলাদেশে চলে আসে টু ওয়ার্ক উইথ সোলার এনার্জি। কেন, কিভাবে, সেসব জিনিস নিয়ে কথা বলবো, বিকজ সেবাস্টিয়ান ইকোনমিক্স ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ডের। এখন এই স্টোরিটা যখনই কেউ শুনে তারা ভাবে কি হ্যাঁ একজন হিপস্টার বিদেশি বাংলাদেশে চলে আসছে, বাট সেবাস্টিয়ান ইজ নট দ্যাট। হি ইজ ওয়ান অফ দ্য স্মার্টেস্ট পিপল আই হ্যাভ মেট, অ্যান্ড আই মিন দ্যাট সিনসিয়ারলি। ওর যে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং আছে অফ ম্যাক্রো এবং মাইক্রো ইকোনমিক্স, অ্যাবাউট হিউম্যান বিহেভিয়ার, অ্যাবাউট কি প্রয়োজন একটা স্টার্ট আপকে দাঁড় করানোর জন্য, এটা খুবই এক্সেপশনাল। সেবাস্টিয়ানের স্টার্ট আপ জার্নি শুরু হয় স্ট্যানফোর্ডে। সেটা নিয়ে আমরা শুনবো কিভাবে ও বাংলাদেশে আদৌ আসলো, কিভাবে সোলশারকে গত 8 বছর ধরে ও গড়ে চলছে, এবং সামনে কি আসছে, কি হবে, এবং বাংলাদেশের পাওয়ার সেক্টর নিয়ে আমরা অনেক কিছু জানবো, যে কীভাবে আদৌ সোলশার কন্ট্রিবিউট করতেছে, বাকি কোন কোন প্লেয়ারগুলো আছে, এই সব কিছু মিলিয়ে আজকের এই কনভারসেশনটা অনেক হাটকে বাট অনেক ইন্টারেস্টিং একটা কনভারসেশন। শুরু করার আগে থেকেই বলে নিচ্ছি, আপনাদের যদি ভালো লেগে থাকে আমি যে কাজটা করছি, তাহলে প্লিজ ডু সাবস্ক্রাইব টু দ্য চ্যানেল। এই ভিডিওটা শেয়ার করবেন, লিঙ্কডইনে শেয়ার করলে ভালো হয়, ফেসবুকে শেয়ার করতে পারেন। বাট মোট কথা, সেবাস্টিয়ানের মতো জার্মান নাগরিক বাংলাদেশে এত বড় একটা প্রতিষ্ঠান বানিয়ে বাংলাদেশেরও যে উপকার করছে, সেই সব এরকম ভালো ভালো স্টোরি আমরা কিন্তু সহজে শুনি না। এগুলো জিনিস ছড়িয়ে দেওয়া আমার মনে হয় আমাদের এক ধরনের দায়িত্ব, এবং যদি আপনারা শেয়ার করেন তাহলে আমারও ভালো হবে, এবং সাবস্ক্রাইব যদি করেন ভালো হবে। যদি লাইক বাটনটায় প্রেস করেন, ইউটিউব অ্যালগোরিদম ভালো মনে করবে। সো এই কাজগুলো প্লিজ 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 করবেন। আমি চেক করতে পারবো না যে আপনারা করছেন কিনা, বাট আমার আশা যে আমি যেহেতু এত পরিশ্রম করে গেস্ট এনে আপনাদের সাথে ইনফরমেশন শেয়ার করছি, নলেজ শেয়ার করছি, আপনারা হয়তোবা একটু ভালো মনে করে এই জিনিসটা করবেন। আমি চেক করতে পারবো না, বাট আমি আশা করছি যে আপনারা করবেন। দ্বিতীয়ত, পুরো কনভারসেশনটা ইংলিশে। আমাদের গেস্ট ফর অবভিয়াস রিজনস ও ইংলিশে বেশি কমফোর্টেবল, এবং আমরা সেটাকে রেসপেক্ট করব। আশা করছি আপনারা একটু সময় নিয়ে হলেও পুরো কনভারসেশনটা শুনবেন। যারা যারা একদম শেষ পর্যন্ত শুনেছেন, প্লিজ কমেন্ট সেকশনে জানাবেন যদি ভালো লেগে থাকে, কোন কোন টপ জিনিসগুলো আপনারা টেক অ্যাওয়ে করলেন সেগুলো নিয়ে জানাবেন। অনেকগুলো কথা বলার পরে এখন চলেন আমরা শুরু করে দিই আজকের এপিসোড উইথ Sebastian Groh. Sebastian, thank you so much for making the time. I really wanted to have this conversation, and there's no better way to get started than asking you to do a quick introduction of yourself. You're many things today, an entrepreneur, a teacher, many things, but I'll just leave it up to you to introduce yourself.
Sure, Fahad. Thanks for having me. So I'm originally from Germany, studied economics. Somehow this led me here to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And fast forward today, I'm the founder and CEO of SOLShare, a climate tech startup, as well as a associate professor at Brack University.
So I want to ask you about SOLShare and your journey to SOLShare, but before that I just want to ask you about a story. So in preparation for this interview, I spoke to some of your team members and former team members at SOLShare. When you say grid, could you kind of explain for us what SOLShare does? I think over the years you've had many projects and many products, but in a nutshell, I think I'll leave it up to you to explain what you guys actually do.
It has evolved really.
Yeah.
But what we started out with, I started coming here to learn. Yes, with the hidden ambition to start a company, but the primary focus was to learn. I was a PhD student when I came here in my last year. Bangladesh was a focus of my dissertation, of my studies, and there was this unique data point. There were That was 2014. There were about 3 million solar home systems in Bangladesh. So solar home system, a remote village, no national grid, maybe a kerosene lamp, maybe some diesel generator, but a solar system, a battery, and that you can basically power your main appliance like a fan, a TV, phone, lights, and so forth. The whole world had 4 million. So when I say the whole world, I mean India, Southeast Asia, the entire continent of Africa, Latin America. Bangladesh had 3. So more than all other countries combined. So I was like, why? Why in Bangladesh?
It's an anomaly.
It's an anomaly. And plus I came with this backpack from Germany. Oh, that's the country of the energy transition, right? We call it the Energiewende. So famous for that. So I checked the numbers in Germany, and then Germany had 1.5 million rooftop solar systems. Bangladesh had twice as many. Nobody seemed to know, including the people here. So when I started teaching here in the first university, I used to ask, what is Bangladesh famous for? And there came many things. I said, are there a few world records? This never came up. And when I told them, they didn't believe me.
Wow.
So that's the impetus of coming here, to find out why. That was basically the root of my thesis. And I went to hundreds of villages through from Rangpur to Chittagong, like north, south, east, west. I always saw a similar pattern. When it was 3 p.m., whenever I went into the house, the battery would show full. And I was like, hang on, it's 3 p.m. We at least have another 3 hours of sunshine. What's happening with that? And the truth was, the system switches off because the battery is full, and everything gets wasted. So the intuitive thing is then buy a bigger battery. It's a very bad idea, because comes the rainy season, you don't fully charge those. These are lead acid battery, right?
Right.
So chemistry 101, if you don't fully charge that, you have what you call a sulfitation effect in the battery, and the battery will break. The battery is very expensive. So you cannot just do a bigger battery. You also can't say, well, let's have a second battery. Same thing will happen, and even worse, a second battery means if you put them together, the performance is as good as the worst performing battery. So it's basically a waste. So what do you do? Now, usually what happens then is you don't invent something which has never been before or never done before. It's usually you figure out what people anyway do, because it's extreme user behavior. I mean, you're an expert on this, right? People were throwing the cable to their neighbor. And then in the evening, they would look out. Oh, the light is on from 6 to 10 next morning. Give me 20 taka. Which taka then? Because 4 hours, 5 taka an hour. Similar, Patao, Uber didn't invent ride sharing, right? It's the same thing. It is just, can you, based on that extreme user behavior, can you come up with a mechanism or a system which makes this a lot more efficient and convenient and faster to scale up? So when I say grid, sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, it's a perfect answer. We have all the time in the world.
When I say grid,
Yeah.
I meant literally the interconnection between different households or shops or schools in a village with people who have sometimes too much power and sometimes too little. That's all we knew, that this is a solution. All the jargon, prosumers and the peer-to-peer, all came later. We had no clue what that is. This is the early days. So in 2013, I did my first Uber ride. And the word sharing economy, I didn't look it up, but I think it came even after that.
Right.
It was similar there. So all this jargon came later. The New York Times called later and said, did you just build the world's first peer-to-peer grid? I said, I don't know what that is, but I can tell you what we did, right? So this came all much later. So the first grid, 2015 in Shoryatpur, turned out to be the first of its kind. And despite all the news and articles you might have seen that this was the super blockchain innovation, there's no blockchain involved.
Okay, so for the listeners just catching up,
Yes.
in very simple terms, I'll try to explain it. You correct me where I'm wrong. I'm sure I'll make some mistakes. So people are basically capturing energy from the sun using their own devices on their own homes, and when they have excess, they're selling it to other people. This is the unutilized power that would have otherwise gone to waste, which they're now earning money from. And this is happening in over 6 million homes as of today, if I'm maybe even more.
I wish.
And then SOLShare is basically the platform that allows you to monetize your spare energy from your home. And this is something that is happening in many parts of Bangladesh today. Okay, cool. Could you kind of unpack some of that?
Yeah, you said something which is we monetize it and people can make money.
Right.
When I brought the sweets, at that time, I was still convinced that if I tell people in all villages of Bangladesh that from now on they can make money from the sun and they can sell their excess electricity from their system, I was convinced, and nobody could convince me otherwise, that this is ingenious and everybody will do that. Unfortunately, that was not true.
What happened?
It goes much deeper. People have a very deep fear to run out of electricity. You see, these people don't have the grid, which almost always works. They are deprived. Then they have the solar home system as a solution. Whether this is first best or second best is a different discussion, which goes very deep into another topic. But they do know that the system is fairly small. Now this guy, white guy, comes and tells me in his broken Bangla that I should sell electricity. I don't have enough. Why should I sell?
Right.
There is no concept of access. There is only a concept of limitation, of scarcity. So when I came up with that, they all said, no. I'm not selling.
And I was reading about a term called energy poverty.
Yes.
What is that? Is this what you just described?
It's part of it. I would say it's a symptom of it.
Okay.
So let's get back to.
Sure.
We all have a phone, right?
Right.
And whether this is a smartphone or a normal bar type phone.
Yeah.
These people also almost. I met very few people who don't have a phone.
Okay.
Let's say in a village of 100 people, 3.
Okay.
All others have a phone, at least per family, right? They at least have one phone.
Yeah.
How do they charge it if they don't have electricity? Now, energy poverty, or then also the extension, an energy poverty penalty, which basically means you get penalized for the fact that you are energy poor. It comes from the poverty penalty. It's a concept which I discussed in my dissertation. A simple example: if you need to charge your phone, you charge it here at your company. The company won't bill you for that. You go to North End, you charge it at North End. You go to the airport tomorrow,
right.
You charge it free. You charge it at home, okay, fine. You pay how much? You pay anywhere between 7 and 8 taka per kilowatt hour. How many kilowatt hours flow into a phone? Very, very little. So your cost is 7 to 8 kilowatt hour to 0 per kilowatt hour. Now go back to the village, the off-grid village. They take their phone to a neighbor or even to a neighboring village, they walk there and give the phone to get it charged. They pay 5 taka per phone charge. If you do an over the envelope calculation, that translates to 600 to 700 taka a kilowatt hour. So, number one, the person who is quite privileged here, paying between 0 and 6 taka, and the person who is already poor pays between 600 and 700 taka. Obviously, they don't pay 600 taka, but over time they do, and on a unit basis they do. That's what we call an energy poverty penalty, because that injustice keeps you in your state of energy poverty because you can't get out. So that's the concept of energy poverty.
Okay, and then so you identified this problem after having traveled to every single or a lot of villages through Bangladesh, and I think it's fair to say you're very well traveled in Bangladesh compared to a lot of Bangladeshis. I certainly haven't been to that many villages. How did you come up with the solution?
Well, observing, right? So observing this, throwing the cable to the neighbor, and then saying, okay, can we kind of automate that? And then realizing that if it's not making money, what is then really the pain point we are solving for here?
Right.
And the answer was, you are right with the 6 million, not with 6 million interconnected, but with the 6 million solar home systems across the country.
Okay.
And this significance of the 6 million has been much stronger as what we today explain as a transition technology towards getting access to the grid, which today close to everyone has. So that picture changed, and accordingly also SOLShare changed. So coming back to that, if you invest into a solar home system, somebody comes to your home and says, how big a system do you need? Well, he wouldn't ask that question. He would ask how many lights, how many fans, how many TV, and then design it accordingly. What happens if, and then you pay for it for 2 to 3 years, right, through a micro loan. What happens if after a year you have a baby, you need another fan? You designed it exactly what you said.
Right. No modifications.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what do you do now? Buy a new system which you put in parallel to that. You can't just block on block like Lego upgrade it. This is where it became interesting. Because now we could say, okay, forget about the selling part. You will be happy when you get money, and you'll realize later on that this is actually a good thing, that when your battery is full, that you shouldn't waste it, you get actually money.
Right.
If that's not making the conversion to buying, that is. If you say, okay, if you need an incremental unit of more electricity, what do you do now? You can't. So this gives you kind of the same sensation you have with the plug. There's unlimited electricity there, right? Unless there's load shedding. If you have a party, you need more. You plug in. Same thing here. If you have a party, you press buy, and you buy from all of your neighbors who may not need it right now. That was the
value prop.
That was the value proposition which worked.
Very cool. And then, what is the state of affairs today? What's the scale at which SOLShare is serving people on the platform?
So, this first grid from 2015 went to by now to 120 grids, literally all over the country.
Right.
And then we had our ups and downs, because what happened is whenever the national grid comes, basically the solar home systems or our grid seem to have served its purpose, because the national grid is a public investment which also follows public accounting and a degree of subsidies in the tariff, which the energy sector loses about 7 billion a year, right? The dollars, that is not taka. So we don't have that deep pockets. So we cannot come to a price per kilowatt hour to compete. And there shouldn't also not be a competition. So what we did is we said, okay, fine. First off, what happened? The Ukraine war. Massive load shedding. People were going back to the grid again and again and again because they needed it as a backup. But our business model wasn't designed as a backup solution.
Right.
So first thing we did, we connected our grids with the national grid.
Okay.
Which was pretty astonishing, because the people who were initially not getting access to this grid suddenly were in a position to, yes, I have access now, but additionally, I also co-power the country to a small degree. But you do, because you have all your solar home systems and you have batteries.
How difficult was that? Getting access to the national...
Well, the national grid, that was done by the government. So
Right.
they did a marvelous job in covering nearly 100%.
Right.
So that was a feat completely done. Then to convince them that those small systems could also play a role, and those people who invested their money
Right.
into buying that system and now, again paying connection fee for the national grid, that was a harder, but that's a policy thing. That's not a technology
exactly.
problem.
And how long did that take?
2 years.
2 years. Right.
2 years and many
Yeah.
drinking tea sessions
Yeah.
In various ministries,
government offices,
electrification board and rural electrification board and so forth. But it did work. We got some. We were quite lucky. We got some push from some influential people.
Yeah.
And now comes basically the big loop. The astonishing thing is, when we talk globally about energy transformation, about what does the future of everything, right? Future of bathroom, future of everything, future of energy. What does the future of energy look like? We more and more come across this term prosumer. So kind of a hybrid version of a producer and a consumer. Up to today, the way we know electricity is, it's a government thing, and I'm a passive consumer. When it comes out of the plug, I'm happy. When it doesn't, I'm unhappy, and I switch on my diesel generator and it makes a lot of noise and starts stinking, and I close the windows. That's the experience right now. There's not much you can do. So when we say prosumer, we're talking about how can we convert a passive consumer into a proactive prosumer. Sometimes you're consuming, sometimes you're producing. That's what many people call the future of energy. That means more decentralization, meaning I don't wait for a gigantic power plant being constructed somewhere at the end of the country and then it's being transmitted, distributed, and if one tree falls, the whole country goes into blackout. Not that system. But the system where you have inbuilt resilience, because you have that, yes, but you also have distributed generation on your roof. Now, many people say, yeah, I have that on my roof, but it doesn't work, right?
Right.
That is a shame, and it is by design almost. The rooftops in Dhaka we see are not built to power our lives. They are built to comply with the building code. It's a very different thing. I've looked at many of them, and I don't think I have found one yet which is actually connected to the building, to the main circuit of the building. Maximum they do power like a security light or something. So you have all, if you stand on a rooftop, I mean, I don't know whether you can go in this building. You see all those panels. And obviously people will say, solar, that doesn't really work. I think that clause, which was probably made with a very good intention that everybody should have some solar, was a huge disservice to the renewable energy industry here, because it kind of...
It seems like a chore.
It's a chore, and it was deeply engraved that solar is, it's a thing which you apparently need to do, but it doesn't really work.
Right.
And I think we are just coming out of this notion. Why? Because suddenly gas prices go up, gas supply becomes a little bit more irregular, and an entire sector, and not any sector, the garment sector, suddenly is compelled to put solar. Not because only the brands may shout you need to be clean, it saves them money.
Economics,
pure economics. A year ago that wasn't true yet. A year ago that was true versus the grid, true versus a diesel generator, but those factories, they have 2-4 megawatt gas generators, and some of them were not even connected to the grid.
So just so I understand, this is happening at the moment, that government RMG factories are adopting solar power to power their daily operations. So what is the scale at which, how much power do garments factories actually consume, and how much solar contribution is coming in today? Could you kind of give us a lay of the land?
Sure. I mean, I just said they have 2, 3, 4 megawatt gas generators.
Right.
That's massive.
That's like all the garments factories combined?
No.
Okay.
Individually. On premise.
Okay.
Captive.
I'm sorry for the stupid questions, by the way.
No. And
how many such garment factories are there?
I mean, there are two things. Garment factories we have, I don't know, 2,000 or something.
2,000.
Right?
Let's say a few thousand.
I'm not sure. Right now, almost every garment factory wants to have solar. So at SOLShare doing rooftop solar, which is one of the things we do right now, we can pick and choose where we want to install, because everybody wants it. And it's not only SOLShare, right? There are a bunch of companies who are doing this now. It's becoming more and more competitive. Margins are going down. Just talking about Peter Thiel is not a good sign for a market. But the good thing is it's working. That's happening. And why? Because this supply of seemingly infinite gas at almost no cost is over.
Right.
Which is, I think, it was good for this whole sector to really become what it is today. But at some point, these are scarce resources, so there is no infinite supply. So I think the recent increases in the prices, I know it has hurt a lot of people, but on the flip side, it has really laid the groundwork for solar to significantly take root in the country in the form of rooftop solar. But it mustn't stop there. So just to put a little bit of framework, the country has about 2 gigawatts of generation capacity. In terms of solar or renewables, for that matter, we have a little bit of wind. Sajid was here, right, in the south. We have this hydropower plant, which is unique because there's very, very, very little inclination in Bangladesh, so there's no scope for for more hydro, or much more hydro.
Okay.
We're still at 3-4%
Of renewable.
of renewables in the energy mix.
Right.
The goal was 10% by 2020. We're in 2023. The next goals are even more ambitious, 40% by 2040.
And what does the rest of the world look like? Is any country really at? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Is this a failing grade, or is everyone kind of falling behind? Or
I mean, globally, the percentage is still in the one digit, but
right.
still 2-3 times higher than Bangladesh.
Got it.
In some countries, you have it's also seasons. In some
Right.
countries, sometimes you use 100%, right?
Oh, okay.
So Germany, Spain have episodes of 100%. California is where you're about to go, is extremely progressive on that.
Wow.
That has to do with a range of factors. Obviously, what is the development stage of a country? Can you afford that? And that's the big question. Is it actually a green premium, as Bill Gates calls it, you have to pay? Or is it actually cheaper? And in the case I just presented to you, there is no green premium. The premium is negative because the garment factory has the option: do I pay 8.5 taka per kilowatt hour from the grid, or do I pay 6 taka for solar? Plus, it doesn't need to invest. I invest. I go to the garment factory and say, look, give me a roof. I put a solar plant on it, and I sell you the electricity at 10%, 15%, whatever we negotiate, cheaper than the grid. Your risk, 0. If I don't sell you, which wouldn't happen, but just speculating, you still pay 8.5 taka. If I sell you, you save 2 taka. That's it.
What about the installation cost of solar panels?
Everything is covered by me. So what we call it is an OPEX model, and it's nowhere in the world called like that. Only here and in India, I think. So what it means, you build it, you own it, and you operate it, and you sign what we call a power purchasing agreement with that factory. So what the factory needs to do is it needs to commit for 10 years, 20 years to buy that electricity at a negotiated price, which can be floating. We can say, okay, look, whatever the grid price is, you pay 15% less. You save 15% for sure, no risk. There's no green premium. That is just purely economics, and there's also nothing to do with green at all.
Right.
It's just
it saves
better
you money.
business. It saves you money.
Yeah.
Now it has become also a commitment from the brands that you have to do that.
Right.
So it's now you have the double benefit.
Right.
You comply with your ESG or with your renewables, which your brands want you, and you save money. So that has become straightforward.
Yeah.
But SOLShare doesn't stop there. If we talk 40% renewables in the energy mix, or let's say 20% even, something will happen. A coal power plant is switched on and then it runs 24/7, supplying electricity like this, which is good because you can calculate with it. It's flat, it's always constant. A solar plant, like the one which maxim could just set up, 200 megawatts, which is the biggest by now, which was a big win. When does it produce electricity? When the sun shines.
Only the day.
And even then, maybe there's a cloud.
Right.
So it's very hard to predict when do you get how much.
Right.
So let's say you are the product manager of the Bangladeshi electricity grid.
Okay.
What do you prefer? That someone tells you 365 days, I give you this, and this you can calculate, or when the wind blows, you get, when it doesn't, you don't, when the sun shines. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you don't get anything, and then good luck.
Right.
You can do this if it is 3, 4, 5, 10%. The moment it becomes 20 and more, your grid needs to become smart.
Right.
And that means you need storage. Storage gives you flexibility. If you, as a product manager of the electricity grid, if you think the grid is, let's say, a living thing. Sometimes it has too much pressure, and sometimes it has to release pressure. How do you do that? With a battery. Sometimes you can charge the battery, so you discharge, you release pressure. Sometimes you pull. So we need storage because that allows us flexibility, and only that will allow to reach the goals the government has set for itself. Then you have two options. first, what kind of storage? I'm talking the simplest storage, which is batteries, which is so far the most used, the most widely known, accepted technology, and commercially most viable. So if you are to build now a huge solar power plant, which is a big win, as I just said, but again, it still is kind of a centralized approach. It's still kind of, okay, I need to find land, which is extremely difficult. And then again, it's probably somewhere where the people are not.
Right.
And then I have to still transmit it and then distribute it. I lose and a tree falls and it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
So first thing we say is we would like to have it more distributed. This is good. We can have a couple more, but we also need to think decentralization, having panels on every house and working panels, not the decoration type we have right now in Dhaka.
Right.
Second, couple it with storage. So does it mean everybody needs to buy a battery and put the battery like a Tesla Powerwall? Yes, it can. But throughout the years at SOLShare, we have stumbled upon something different. Going back, sorry, I'm making a big...
Go
back
ahead,
to those grids for a moment.
Right.
I asked you, okay, if you don't have electricity, how do you charge your phone? Another thing we encountered is Mishuks and easy bikes.
Right.
Over the years, more and more I saw on the grid, and I was like, where do you charge?
Yeah.
I have to check, And he doesn't know how many kilometers he has left. It's his feeling. He doesn't do routes he doesn't know, because he knows I can do, if you ask him how many kilometers you can go, he tells you I can do 5 rounds, right?
Right.
So which means if I want to go to that village, no, this is not in my round. Okay, fine. Because at the end of the day, he still needs to get back to the grid, the closest grid point to charge, or to the closest garage. I was like, at 2-3 p.m., remember the batteries are all full. And these guys were there and we were doing, they don't call it that, but they were doing like kind of a siesta, right? So not much is happening between 3 and 5 p.m.
Right.
Or 2 and 5 p.m. This is exactly the 3 hours when we have excess energy.
Right.
Can I not charge that vehicle? So we tried. Disaster. Why? Because one of the insights of my PhD was why Bangladesh was so successful, because it has the best batteries.
Okay.
It was the notion of poor people don't need cheap products. They need high quality products made affordable. They put into solar home systems industrial standard batteries. People declared Bangladesh as crazy back then. It's a miss, not a miss, but it's a very fascinating story that the World Bank said, you are nuts. I'm not giving you money if you put an industrial battery into a tin shade house. And there were a few people here running ITCOL back then. ITCOL is the infrastructure development company limited, who said, okay, look guys, either we do it that way or we don't do it at all. And they won the argument. So a battery came with 5-year warranty and a 2-3 year microcredit. That's critical. In most Latin American, Southeast Asian, African countries I visited, the loan was 2 years and the battery lasted 1 year. And then the fighting goes.
Oh, wow.
Whose fault is it?
Right.
The MFI is not getting the money, the microfinance institution. The technology provider gave a bad battery and then everything collapses. That didn't happen here because of these things. But to go back to our Mishuks and rickshaws, unfortunately, those same super high quality batteries are super poor quality in the use case of a Mishuk or an easy bike. These lead acid batteries are designed for a stationary purpose, not for a mobility purpose.
Okay.
So these same batteries, which lasted 5, 6, 7, 8 years, now last 6, 7, 8 months.
Right.
And that means you have that problem why in other countries the solar home system programs didn't work. In Bangladesh they did work. Now it's different.
Right.
Because the same batteries don't work for this purpose. Similar to a lead acid battery, you cannot fast charge it. So when we tried, it's like Hannes, the CTO of SOLShare, calls it, if you take a garden hose and you have an open bucket and you try to fill it,
right,
everything spills, more spills and goes into the bucket. That's the situation if you want to fast charge a lead acid battery. So we said, okay, maybe there is a pattern here. Poor people don't need cheap products, but high quality products made affordable. Can we get those super fancy Tesla batteries for those really cool easy bikes and Mishuks. After all, there are more easy bikes and Mishuks in Bangladesh than Tesla has sold cars globally. So it's just fair to give them proper batteries. So we brought the first lithium batteries into the country, 3 times more expensive than a lead acid battery.
Okay.
All right, 3 times more expensive, but then again, they last 5-6 times longer. So that could work, no? Technically speaking, you just need to design the financial product accordingly. So we went to the banks. Will you finance it? No. Why? And they will run away with it. So, okay. And also, these Mishuks and easy bikes. Not sure.
Yeah.
So they are kind of grayish, right?
Yeah.
They were banned and then they were recovered.
Right.
Now came a new policy in. Now
Right.
it seems all fine,
Right.
but it was always a little
Right.
shaky. So we said, okay, fine, let's try it ourselves. And the people, when we gave them the lithium batteries, they started calling them egg battery. Egg battery because it's one battery which makes it work. With a lead acid battery, you need 4 batteries for a Mishuk, 5 batteries for an easy bike. So they call it egg battery. And it turned out the range, how many kilometers they go, is longer with that battery.
Okay.
It also turns out in the afternoon, when the lead acid battery voltage goes down, the vehicle becomes slower. The discharge curve of a lithium ion battery is different, of an egg battery is different. It stays constant, the speed. So they would be able in the later afternoon still, especially in the hill tracks. Chittagong has the most concentration of easy bikes and Mishuks, 33%. In these hilly areas, they could still climb the hill. So that was a big thing. So it turned out they make about 30-40% more money per day. If they made 1,000 takas, now they're making 1,300, 1,400 taka. That's a big deal. We learned 10%, 15% more. No,
doesn't make a
minimum 20%. You need more than
Right.
incremental, right? 30-40, pretty strong. Then we saw in the garages. So the garages are where they park their vehicles at night and charge them and also get the loans and whatnot. The lithium battery is twice as efficient than a lead acid battery.
Okay.
So the utility bill goes down by 40-50%. That's massive. What is a garage? Its input is electricity and output is electricity. So it's all about utility bill. That's 80% of your OPEX of running a garage. If your OPEX is reduced, is cut in half, you want that. So we got the driver on board. We got the garage on board. What was missing? Someone needs to finance this because nobody can afford a battery which is not 3 times. We found by now local assemblers here in Bangladesh. So we brought that down because the import tax duties, if you import properly, is very, very high.
Right.
So we found local assemblers. We said to them, okay, this is really good, your battery. Look, here's the Tesla battery. Can you just change this and this so this thing doesn't take fire? Yes, okay. So very quickly, they made it.
Right.
And it looks rock solid, right? Which is very important in terms of safety. You don't want to have a lithium battery on fire. It's like a volcano.
Right.
you can't even extinguish it with water.
Okay.
You can't. So you need, it's complicated. You need special equipment and whatnot.
No, but
so
in case this happens and a fire does...
You need to give that training. You cannot just...
Okay.
Yeah. So you need most of those fire extinguishers by now have this foam and stuff, right? So that's what you need.
Interesting.
That's on the hazardous side.
Yeah.
What we were missing was the financier. So we went to the MFIs and said, look, if I put a chip into that battery, which lets you track it, which lets you switch it off whenever the person is not paying, would that change anything? So it might. It would become, technically it would then become an asset-backed loan. Because before it wasn't considered an asset because people run away with it. So we came up with a very nifty IoT solution where if you steal that battery, if you open it, if you cut the wires...
It'll explode. No?
Luckily not. If you take out our IoT chip, it will, before that, still send a distress signal and the battery becomes unusable.
Okay.
The only thing you can do is you can throw out the BMS, throw out everything and only take the cells, reassemble the cells, program a new BMS, buy a new BMS, program new... And I said, okay, whoever can do that, he deserves the value of that battery, right? So we filed a patent for that and we got the patent. And now we can basically manage whole fleets of batteries because we can talk to them. and I think I made a loop really big now. Trying to close it. Imagine a situation. So the MFI is now on board.
Okay.
MFI is financing it. Garage is loving it. Drivers loving it. So far, all good. Now we don't know, but let's say there are 3 million of those vehicles. Tesla sold 2 to 2.5 million cars. 3 million of those here.
Right.
If I have 3 million vehicles with batteries, I can remotely access. These are 3 million batteries. Each battery is, let's say, 100 amp hour, 1.2 kilowatt hours. This has what we call a VPP, virtual power plant potential, to buffer 20% of the country's entire peak load.
Wow.
So we don't always need to think, we need to buy this big building, fill it up with batteries, and those batteries then will buffer the grid. Yes, we will need some of that. But why don't we start with things we already have? And now you see the parallel in SOLShare-Er's approach. Can we build a platform based on the resources, or the world records for that matter, in terms of EVs, in terms of solar home systems, which are already there? So in the beginning, we tapped into those solar home systems, started the trading to tap into these excess energy. It's the same thing now. If a vehicle comes back at 8 p.m. to the garage, it's usually not being pushed, hopefully not. There is still juice in the battery. Our data tells us this is about 30%.
Okay.
At 8 p.m. is when our load shedding starts. Why? Because 3 million vehicles are pulling on the grid.
Yeah.
That's significant load on the grid. 3 million 100 amp hour batteries is a lot of juice. What if I can give a command to all of those batteries or some of those batteries to say, no. You do the opposite now. You still have 30%. You feed in that 30%. You go to 0, which is not a problem for a lithium battery. You can deep discharge. It's not an issue. It's just one cycle. It's the full cycle, basically. So you don't even degrade the battery because it's just finishing the whole cycle. What happens to the grid? It doesn't have to pull. The opposite, it has even extra energy. Load shedding is over. In that area, at least.
Right.
At midnight, what do we have? We have overcapacity in Bangladesh at midnight. That's why we have different tariffs. We have the so-called super off-peak tariff at midnight. So if I sell at 8 p.m. at 8.5 taka, I buy it back at 6 taka at midnight. The next morning, the vehicle is fully charged. Hardly anybody rides at night. This works. It is completely idle hours. So you have a primary use case, which is a battery powering a vehicle. Done. That's a business case. And then you have an upside. You have a secondary use case. That same battery as flexible buffer storage to help the national grid. So again, the story is you have people at what we usually say at the base of the pyramid who now, with the interconnection of our first peer-to-peer grids, are co-powering the country, even to a very small degree. But the drivers of these Mishuk drivers, it's the same thing. Their vehicles, their investments in the batteries are helping everyone else in the country. If you explain this to them, they first don't believe it.
Right.
But once they do, because you can show it, they become really, really proud. And I think when we talk future of energy or all these future things, people always think about very complicated things. But we can actually make it work through some nifty technology, to this platform approach. We can tap into resources that are already there. Don't need to invest that much money into new things. And that's when all this green premium talk goes out of the window, because we can operate on a lot of, economics would call it sunk cost, right? It's already invested, the battery's already there. So let's create more value, put it to use, put it to more use. Sorry, again, very long.
No. So that was perfect. I was enthralled by the entire storytelling of it. I just want to understand a few, numbers and facts. So, in terms of lithium batteries that you've distributed to the Mishuks and the rickshaws, how many so far?
So we've trialed it. First of all, we wanted to find out, does it only work in Shariatpur, or does it work in Rangpur, Chittagong, Khulna, wherever?
Right.
So we could call it's adopted nationwide. Okay. But in numbers, it's still very little. Okay. We have about 20 garages who have adopted it, And they all try with a few batteries first, right?
Yeah.
Because you need, first of all, the MFI needs to pilot, needs
Right.
to finance it before they make it basically a part of their portfolio approach. So we're just at that conversion point. So it's about 2-3 batteries per garage. So we're at 30-40 batteries
Okay.
so far.
And how long has it been?
We started only the beginning of the year with this, and we tested for a long time.
Right.
We tested for a long time. The grids were running.
Yeah.
The interconnection of one grid to the national grid, that technology development took us it was quite a hard nut to crack because it's bi-direction, right? Grid, not vehicle, sorry. This is grid to national grid, microgrid to national grid, and vice versa. That technology now is what I before briefly described as the virtual power plant. So those 20 garages, let's have them fully convinced that they are convinced, but the financing comes in. That let's say they have 50 vehicles, that all 50 are lithium. First of all, then it's easier to show the utility bill goes down. Because if you have 2-3 out of 50, not much is happening, right? So that's a point to be proven. Once they have 50, it's 50 batteries who come at night into the same building. It's nothing else than our peer-to-peer grid again. And then we connect it to the national grid. This approach in, let's say, the US wouldn't work that well because everybody who has a Tesla, he doesn't drive that Tesla into a garage every evening, right? He parks it in his own garage.
Great.
So it's only one Tesla. But we have 50 Teslas in the same building, in the same
garage,
tin shade
Yeah.
structure.
Right.
Which is beautiful because I have 50 100 amp hour batteries at the same time, more or less 8 p.m., 9 p.m. In the same spot. I can pool all those resources and make them available to the grid. It's a very unique setup, and the approach SOLShare has taken, both with the peer-to-peer grids as well as now with the e-mobility, I'm not sure we could do it in any other country right now to that extent. It's a very powerful combination of, let's say, habit with these garages, out of need, out of necessity, obviously. You don't have space in your house to put, or if you have, maybe someone steals it. So it's a lot of factors at play. And you have those numbers, which is crazy. When we talk electric vehicles, we always think about cars. Cars only make a fraction of the percentage. What is really driving this electric vehicle revolution are the Mishuks and the easy bikes, and soon to be the two-wheelers. With Runner, Walton, and also getting their permits, this will become huge.
So what's happening with the e-bikes? What's the permit that they're getting?
So
I read about it, but I just want you to explain.
So we have this weird thing. There is the BRTA, which rules over the country in terms of transport questions. But then we have city corporations who tend to give out permits for Mishuks and easy bikes. We have that in Cox's Bazar. We have that in Rajshahi is very famous for that. We have a project with the city corporation there, where they have like a check card, like your bank or your ATM card. That's a card they have there. They don't have a plate, but they have a card and they have a number written on the vehicle, and they even have rules that on Mondays only these numbers are allowed to run because there are too many by now. And in the let's say from morning to afternoon, from afternoon to night, only the even numbers and the uneven numbers. They all have all that.
Right.
At the same time, there was a in the High Court, there was a ban. Nobody really understood why. Well, some did, but it wasn't logical.
Right.
And I mean, realistically, there are 3 million vehicles, drivers. Let's say each driver has a family of 4. So we're talking 5 people, 15 million people who depend on the livelihood of that vehicle. So you really want to ban that? It's impossible. Even if you do it won't help, right? I mean, yes, they shouldn't drive on the highway. But how many roads in the country are highways out of the entire road network?
Right.
3%. So 97% market is there. If you drive back to your village, you take a bus, but that bus doesn't go to your village, right? It goes on a regional road, and then you still have 10 kilometers to go left or right.
Yeah.
it is the backbone of the transportation sector. And that has been acknowledged. The energy advisor to the Prime Minister, Dr. Tawfiq Ilahi Chaudhry, has very clearly said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it was in the news, that the new policy will have a provision for those electric three-wheelers. You cannot ban them. Yes, you want to make them safe. Yes, you want to make sure they don't drive on the highways, because that different speeds cause problems. We see that every day. But then the harassment which the drivers experience, especially here in the Dhaka, larger Dhaka area, that will stop. And it's also kind of, the whole world shouts for electric vehicles, and you get, all kinds of benefits. We see some very good policies in neighboring countries in favor of them, that you don't have to pay certain fees, you have to pay lower tax or whatnot.
Right.
And here we banned them so far. So that's, I think these days are over. That realization is there. We're still waiting for the public text to come out. We do see, especially when fundraising, that investors are a little bit eerie about that, especially local, also large conglomerates. A lot of people are just waiting for that law to go into effect. And I think then we see an explosion in this market, even more than it grew from nothing to 3 million. Despite all of that, just imagine you have an incentive, what happens to this sector.
Very, very, very cool. Again, enthralled by your storytelling. And I have to ask you, so when you're talking about the assets, when you're talking about, hey, lithium acid batteries versus this battery, that battery, it seems like you're an engineer. Yeah. But you from what I can tell, you studied not engineering, economics. Could you tell us a bit about how you went from wanting to work at McKinsey, or you were an investment banker at one point, how you went from being an investment banker to, I don't know, probably attending some seminar, and then eventually landing here in Bangladesh. Could you give us that backstory?
Sure. So I think an important part in my life was when I did my A-levels in Germany, we still had something which was called compulsory military service. Okay. Nobody could get out of it unless you went to a certain assessment test and you were found physically
incapable,
unable, or whatnot. That's what we all, and if you go to the extreme, then you would be, what we call in Germany, you would be sorted out, and then you could directly study.
Okay.
The very ambitious among us, counterintuitive, wanted to get sorted out.
Right.
Because we wanted to go directly to study, we didn't want to lose.
Right.
We did 13 years of school, now it's 12. And another year, that means 14 years, we lost 2 years compared to the Americans or whatnot, right? We're like, hey, come on, why would I start in the back? I tried to get sorted out, I failed. And I think that was good. I didn't do military service, I have to admit, but I did what we called an alternative to that, which was kind of a social gap year.
Okay.
So I worked for 1 year with in an institution in England with people with autistic kids, Down syndrome, Asperger, like all the spectrum of autism.
Okay.
That was, I think, retrospectively extremely important for me, because if you are too much in your lane, you are like a racehorse. You don't see left and right anymore.
Yeah.
That year was anything but a lost year.
Right.
It opened new perspectives. It was a time of reflection, so that was really good. Unfortunately, that reflection didn't last too long, because then I studied economics in a very, very neoliberal school.
Okay.
And that school was the feeder to Europeans' best investment banks. So I did work on the trading floor, pre-Lehman that was even.
Okay.
This was when, champagne was flown in with helicopters in these big bottles, because, everybody thought it's infinite, like the gas supply, the infinite money supply. And then Lehman came and everybody woke up. I had left, luckily, a little earlier, because in school, I was still a student. There was a discussion called Doing Business with the Poor, which that was, I think, 2008, was very provocative.
Right.
For poor people, you give development aid. You don't do
business with them. Yeah.
That wasn't. I mean, today there's a realization that doing business with them is probably helps them much more than giving them
A handout.
a handout.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. And there I came across an organization which was based out of Berlin, whose founders came to Bangladesh two Germans in 2001.
Okay.
To do studies on Grameen Bank / Grameen Shakti, the solar home system. 2001 was before ITCOL started its lending program. So this was very early days. Nobody could have seen this. I mean, it's hockey stick par excellence, this solar home system program. And they talked about their experience in Bangladesh. It's been the first time when I started reading books by Muhammad Yunus and all that stuff. So instead of going to Deutsche Bank back on the floor, I went and did an internship at that, it's called Micro Energy International, at that company. And that company tried to see, does the model of Grameen Shakti work in other countries? Can it be replicated? So I spent a lot of time in Nepal, in the Philippines, in Peru, in Central America, and so forth. And I saw these solar home systems failing everywhere for the reasons mentioned before.
Right.
So instead of going for a master's in hardcore, you would do econometrics, financial econometrics, and then you would become like this star trader nerd kind of thing. I said, no, let me study development economics.
Okay.
So I did that. I signed in, and then I had an option to do a semester abroad, like in UCLA or Yale or in Pune, in India. And I said, hang on, I'm studying development economics. What do I learn being in LA? So I went to India and studied half semester there, and I liked it. Then I studied another half semester in El Salvador, then the most dangerous country in the world, just to get this experience. And I think I learned there much more than if I went to one of those Ivy League schools. But I did want to go to an Ivy League school again as well. So after my master's, I started a PhD with a scholarship. I started a PhD not to do a PhD, but because micro energy was very small, and the scholarship would kind of pay my working there, and I could do PhD. It was always a kind of bootstrapping kind of
thing.
And then I said, no, I want to go to Stanford.
Okay.
I wasn't into entrepreneurship. I wasn't into PhD really either, but I knew I wanted to work what I was doing, like trying to find energy solutions to fight this energy poverty problem, because that's something which I could identify with, having seen this across. So Stanford had a program where 80% were Stanford students and 20% was kind of a quota, which was called Stanford Ignite.
Okay.
And I wanted to get in there, but you had to pretend to be an entrepreneur. So I went to Daniel at Micro Energy and said, I need an idea, we need to do something. And we came up with something, and okay, these solar home systems, could we plug them together and then somehow do something? There's no sharing economy, any of that, right? It's just plug them together and do something.
Yeah.
Make a grid. Grid is better than individual, so let's interconnect, synergy effect, 1 + 1 is 3, blah, blah, blah. So I made a video with all the people who were working at Micro Energy then, and sent it in as my application, and then I had these too many interviews, and I got in. Nice. Just that I didn't want to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then we were 70 people in that batch.
Did you call it SOLShare back then?
No, it was swarm electrification, we call it, because it acts as a swarm, like a school of fish. I understood only later that in English swarm is kind of an attacking kind of thing. In German, school of fish is also swarm,
right.
So that was a little...
Okay, cool.
But okay, can't have it all.
Yeah.
Language. We were 70 people, 70 PhD students in that Stanford 2013 batch, and 12 ideas would be chosen from the 70. So we all had to pitch and convince the maximum of other fellow students to join your team.
Right.
So I managed that. So suddenly I was one of the 12 ideas to be followed. It was called swarm electrification. The first thing they told me, Sebastian, I did vote for you, but this is a terrible name. So we came up with SOLShare. Sol, it was a Spanish guy who came up with it. Sol is Spanish for sun or solar, and sharing is sharing economy first, Uber right. It all fits together. That's how SOLShare came about. At the end of the semester, we had to pitch again. Given we had, for a couple of months, we had worked on this business plan and had to pitch to a Silicon Valley jury on campus. So we pitched, and at the end of the pitch, one of the jury members said, "This was fascinating. This is a fantastic idea. I would love to fund this." Sebastian, so how is Bangladesh? I said, well, I've never been there, right? So I got a 0 on authenticity and no funding. And he said to me, a little patronizing to be honest, and I was very mad after that.
Right.
He said, "Look, Sebastian, like boy, why don't you go there? And once you understand what you're actually talking about, then you come back and we can talk again." That was in 2013. So with the team, we applied for a business plan competition in Singapore, and we got into the final. And so I flew to Singapore, and then I said, why bother flying back to Silicon Valley or back to Germany? It's just Singapore is right next to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Let's go there. So I came in January 2014.
Okay.
That was full hard-on hotel.
Yeah.
Nobody into Dhaka, nobody out, and I remember it vividly. Next to me, like these Molotov cocktails, a car suddenly jumping. I was like, oh my god,
Where did I land?
what did I do? I was couch surfing.
Yeah. Do you know anyone here?
I knew one person I knew,
Okay.
Sharia Chaudhary
Okay.
from UIU, because he was a solar researcher, and I
Okay.
met him in a German conference. So I went first to him and said, "I'm here." He said, "What? What are you doing here?" And I was couch surfing. So those were the first people I met, and I moved in. I still slept on the couch, but made it permanent couch surf. That's how it started.
Yeah.
I still had my scholarship, so I got a lot of money because they expected me to live in a Western city.
Right.
So the money was good enough to rent an apartment, hire 1 or 2 people, make half the apartment the office, and the rest is history. So that's how it all started.
Sebastian, I want to shift gears a bit and just talk about the business side of SOLShare. So in 2018, you guys raised, I think, north of $1 million from, let's say something New Ventures, Inoji New Ventures. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. I think your next round was in 2020. Actually, in 2019, you raised another round from Sangam Ventures. In 2020, you raised another $1 million or so from Impact Partners, something Impact. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and kind of ask you to kind of guide us through the structure of the company, if that makes sense, because I think you got some grants, and then there's the venture rounds, and then you have a bunch of different products, and then how have you kind of structured the company, and how much have you raised so far? How is it operating on a finance side?
Yeah, I think we did a few things differently than you would normally expect. So from that Stanford days, what my professor tried to instill in me is, Sebastian, giving the people the ability to share electricity is a huge value. Don't do anything else. Do this, focus on this, and go. If I had done that, we would be dead 3 times in the water by now. I do think that things here in Bangladesh, or probably in emerging markets, work sometimes a little bit differently. There's a lot, I mean, yes, you could say, again, Peter Thiel, full hard on down, you make one bet and that needs to give you your entire portfolio's return. Right? And if it's not that, then stop the company and start a new one. But that's not the mentality I like to have. I think we always, and it's this mission-driven approach, right? And not opportunity-driven.
Okay.
It's this deep mission, this deep insights on energy poverty and on the not the cheap products but the high quality products.
Made affordable.
Made affordable. Thank you.
Yes.
And but also the people you grow the company with. We tried to build our first product still in Silicon at Stanford, then at TU Berlin. It didn't work. The first smart meter which actually worked was built by engineers here who came from a village, who in their early formative years didn't have electricity. That's when the product worked.
What was different? Because clearly, it wasn't the education.
The Stanford professor said to me, oh yeah, and then we programmed a meter that at 3 a.m. the washing machine starts. And the professor was Indian, right? So he wasn't too far away. I mean, he had lived 20 years in the valley.
Right.
And I said, look, there's no washing machine.
Yeah.
There is no washing machine in rural Bangladesh. And there also won't be in the foreseeable future. That is a service which is actually completely useless. In terms of opportunity cost and whatnot. So I think you need to be as close as possible to the problem. Empathy, what we usually vouch for, it is hard if you're not there. So one rule for SOLShare was also nobody is allowed to be a full-time at SOLShare who wants to live in Berlin or wherever. I know there's all this, like with COVID, everybody can work. This is all nice and sweet, but I do believe that we have to be here together. Because otherwise you have different salaries suddenly, different living costs, you have this distance. It's no good. So we lost a few good people, but we also won a few good people. But coming back to your question on fundraising. So we started out as a Bangladeshi company only. And then we got lucky, we won a grant. Because we did something for the poor people, right? And then you get money. Okay. Yeah. But we didn't get that money here, we won that money internationally. And then I said, okay, send me the money. And then the Bangladesh bank said no.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized for the first time, I think it was in 2015, that as a private limited company, as a startup, you cannot get a grant. Which is one form of bootstrapping, right? Not giving out equity, and this is taking away. Recently I learned I can't sign a safe note. So, and then people said, no, you can. I said, no, you can't. Full stop. If you can, then you're doing something illegal. Full stop. That's it. End of the story. So we set up a holding company in Singapore. Now this today everybody does, right? In order to attract investment. That was not my intention back then. My intention was only I need to get this $100,000 somewhere into the country. So I could send it as a paid up capital or as a mother to daughter company loan or whatnot. And that was the reason how we got. That's how it started. We then realized with a lot of media attention that maybe this is not an NGO-like thing. This is a proper what we learned in Stanford, right? This is a startup. This is a tech company. This is a platform. We said, wow, okay, it's like I give you that. That's like the patao for the off-grid world, right? As we usually use these things. Oh, okay. Then there was a program called Free Electrons, which is an accelerator program by 10 of the largest energy utilities in the world. And just for fun, we participated because by definition that didn't make sense, because how are these 10 utilities defined? They know their customers, and where are their customers? On grid.
Right.
What are our customers?
Off grid.
Off grid. They have no clue what we're talking about. They don't even know that they exist. So apparently we were weird enough to get at least accepted to the boot camp. And then from the boot camp, 10 were selected for the actual program. And the program was pretty cool. It was like every 2 months, a physical on-site event in a different continent where the utility is from. And each utility kind of wanted to impress the others how awesome a host they are. So the Aussies, and then in San Francisco, and then in Lisbon, and everybody wanted to be this awesome show. That was really cool. We barely made it. We were number 12, and actually only 10 should qualify, but somehow they said, no, these weird guys, I want to see how this play out. Let's take 12. And fast forward, with things like, hey guys, we do peer-to-peer trading. Can you do that? No, you can't. Why? Because the EU law, you have to sign 26 contracts before you can send a single kilowatt hour to your neighbor. It's just not possible. We're doing it here. We're doing it in 50 grids then. Oh, okay. So you have all that data, how they trade? Yeah, we do. You want to analyze it? Yeah, you have to invest in us. And we won the whole thing. That was another $100,000 in prize money, but more importantly, it was the first time that somebody invested equity. It was a priced round even.
Okay.
So we did the valuation in an Excel sheet, and then the valuation was 25 million.
Okay.
And then they said, oh, we forgot the country risk factor. Oops. 0.
Oh, wow.
That's how the negotiation went, right? For them, I think it was just a gigantic fun game. For me, it was that serious. But yeah, we somehow met in the middle and did the round. And then we had people like Sonia Bashir Kabir, who very early backed us here. I think we need 100 Sonias and Rahats, and in order for this to really, and Fahads for that matter, in order for this really to, to make startup really the thing.
Right.
Because I feel like when some of the prominent startups who are hyped, if they fail, that could give a deep scar and could give a sink, and that's I think that's a little bit the danger in betting on one thing, which you're being taught. But yeah,
right.
So they're not with Peter Thiel. Diversification, I do think, especially in these kind of markets here, is important. So coming to that where we did our first round, and then more utilities jumped on. So this is what we call corporate venture capital funds, right?
Right.
So it's financial return, but it's also very strategic in terms of, okay, how do they do that, and what can we learn maybe for the European market or for the American market and so forth. The same with the easy bikes and Mishuks. This vehicle grid to vehicle is something everybody dreams about right now. We can do it here already, whereas even in California they're kind of trying to figure things out. So with our recent virtual power plant white paper we wrote, this is avant-garde, and which is, I think, is fascinating because people don't expect it usually. So people often expect, okay, there's some great invention in Silicon Valley, and then we bring it here, and then we kind of change it a little bit to make it work here. But no, we're trying to come up with the new thing here, and maybe then they bring it and change it a little bit for them. It's a reverse dynamic. But we also knew that this is infrastructure building, and that takes painstakingly long. And plus, it's infrastructure building and low income population. So it'll be very, very hard. So I said, okay, look, we cannot sell the company 6 times over until we actually make serious revenue. So we need to do kind of a parallel route. We'll tap into development funds,
right,
which is either grants or prize or simply projects. Like the UN tells us, build 2 grids in the Rohingya camps. Okay, I'm doing it. Give me $100,000. It's very good business.
Yeah.
And it's high impact.
Right.
So I need that. But I also need the VC capital because I have to build a platform and I have to be fast and I need some firepower. So that's how we went in parallel. Then we realized, okay, this is a very thin line because there will always be another project which will give another $100,000 but will distract us to build faster out our platform. So I think during COVID, where everybody kind of went into reflection mode, so did we. We said, okay, we have to change the approach a little bit. We can only take development money or project if it is at least 90 to 100%, however you measure that, it'll always be blurrish, but it needs to fundamentally feed into the main business line, and we essentially would do that anyways. Now, you can't say this to funders, because if you do it anyways, they don't need to give you the money, right? But there's ways to communicate that. And the good thing then is also for the funders, it's not just a project we do to get the money, but our whole heart is in it, and often we put in more resources than we would have committed because we anyway do it, because it's our core business. So funder wins, and we get basically cross subsidies until we have full product market fit. Like this valley of death for us is not around a deeper round, but it's around another round, but also a lot of development money.
Right.
Will it work? I don't know. So far it worked quite well.
Yeah.
In total numbers, just because I think you like numbers, so we raised, acquired, did projects of about $6.5 million, and only, we just a few days back got a little bit more VC money, but not announced. But we only got about half of that is actually investment money, either through a prize round or through a safe note.
Very interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I read somewhere that you at SOLShare collectively generate around 100 megawatts, kilowatt hours of
that would be megawatt hours then.
Megawatt hours, okay, sorry. 100 megawatt hours of electricity. Is that roughly ballpark correct or no?
I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I wouldn't know, and I don't think it matters. So that kind of a number.
Okay.
What matters more is, let's say, how many drivers we have on the road, how many garages we have, how many grids we have, how many megawatt have we installed on rooftop solar, which I mentioned before. Because all this taps then into a potential which because everything is for us digital, right? Everything is IoT.
Yeah.
So all of this we can control. And that, the culmination of those numbers then defines how big of a power plant we have. And power plant here can also be a virtual power plant. It doesn't need to be that I need to own those batteries. Pato doesn't own any
bikes or cars. Yeah.
Airbnb doesn't own any bed.
Yeah.
Why would we need to own all those batteries and panels? So it's more like how many bikes or easy bikes, Mishuks, do I have access to and can control, and what is the potential of this control compared to the entire national grid? And that's what I told you. If we manage the existing fleet, we can control 20% of the entire peak load of Bangladesh.
Got it.
Not control, buffer, sorry.
Yeah, contribute to
Yeah.
buffer. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Some of your ex-team members have described you as, actually one, Neil, who I briefly mentioned. Neil mentioned you as one of the best leaders he has ever worked with, period, full stop. And he also shared the story of how he joined. I'll do a quick TLDR, but you can correct me. Apparently, he heard about what you were doing at SOLShare while he was abroad, meaning I think he was in India at the time. And he just had to work with you guys. So he came over, or he talked to you guys. You said there's no open role, we can't hire you, we can't pay you, etc., etc. But he somehow got himself to Bangladesh regardless.
Called from the airport, said I'm here.
He's here, and then he's just stayed here. I think he stayed here for 6 months before he actually found a role or something like that. Could you tell the story of Neil joining, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question about why he thinks you're one of the best leaders that he's ever worked with. I'll just take 30 seconds more. He mentioned that you're able to think deeply about the mission that you're on, and you're able to connect dots that are far apart from each other. So that's a great quality for any leader to have, to connect dots and really set a vision for the company. But you're able to do this in a way that clearly inspires people beyond imagination and drives them across country without a surety of a job. So could you kind of tell us that story and then kind of speak more to your leadership approach?
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive because we surely didn't connect any dots with Neil. But he applied from India. I remember reading his CV and I thought, oh, that's very cool. He worked for the who is who in India in our sector, in the off-grid Indian sector, like really good companies in India. And he seemed to work for them all. He has a very interesting upbringing, school education, alternative, really cool thinking outside the box. So yeah, I said, come. But then I kind of switched off and he needed an invitation letter, right? He didn't know for what he would come.
Yeah.
And at some point he just gave up talking to us and just called me from the airport and said, so you said come, right? I'm here. Who are you again? Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
So we did a terrible job in attracting good talent there, I guess. And then we said, okay, let's start. And I read this book, which is called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. It's a Brazilian guy.
Yeah, I know Ricardo Semler.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Because
I think he's a real estate, or he worked in what in Brazil? Real estate.
It was a factory which made turbines for ships, all like heavy construction.
No one knows of him. I know.
Yeah, very few people know, but fascinating guy.
Yeah.
And he had this concept that you have someone and you just say, okay, for the first months, you're lost in space. Meaning, just walk through the office, talk to anybody you want, work in any team you want, and after 1 month, you come to me and you tell me what you experienced, what did you like, what did you dislike, what do you think works, what doesn't work, and where do you feel you can make the biggest contribution. So that's all we did was NEEL. And so NEEL came after 1 month and said, Sebastian, your product team and your business development, I don't even know they know each other. Like, oh, that's bad. They think about two completely different things.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so why don't you become the bridge then? That's how we had our first product manager.
Right.
So NEEL was effectively the first product manager who tried to translate, and that is we know today is one of the most important roles in a company, but we weren't aware. We didn't know really what a product manager is. We would call it probably a project manager, which is a different thing.
Right.
So that was NEEL, and that's how he found his role. Would I have offered him this role? No, because I didn't know it existed.
Right.
Would he have offered to be this role? No, he had no clue. He just knew he wants something. He didn't know what he can contribute. And that's funny when we ask someone in an interview, how can you add value? Can you actually give a good answer to that? You can give a rehearsed answer. You don't know anything. So the lost in space, we don't always do that.
I was going to ask you.
I wish we would.
Yeah, so would Lost in Space work with people who do not have the internal drive or, the initiative taking, or who's not a self-starter basically? Would it work with those guys? I don't think so. I'm
not sure. And it would be stupid for me to say, but we only hire those people, because that would also be problematic then if you have such a homogeneous lot, right? So that is also not a solution. So it's probably not for everyone.
Yeah.
NEEL definitely has all the attributes you just said. So for him it was just the perfect deep dive where he could settle. I mean, he came from India, he had never been to Bangladesh. His mom comes from Kolkata, so he knew
the language,
a version of Bengali.
Yeah.
I remember he became a movie star at SOLShare, right? He was in this famous documentary 2040, which was the opening movie at the Berlinale, and it was a big deal, and it was him who, and when he spoke Bangla or Bengali in his case, the people immediately picked up, why didn't you take someone who's actually from here, right? Yeah. But it was NEEL who was perfect for that role. Maybe not in terms of his accent, but he was just perfect for that role.
Right.
And, so yeah.
So I have a few kind of rapid fire, not the deepest questions, very shallow, but I just wanted to ask you. So you mentioned on an interview that you started the company with a culture of, hey, come when you want, just do your work, just leave, and now you have like fingerprint scanners to clock in and clock out of the office. In running a company in Bangladesh, what have your observations been, which are cultural differences? Because you come from Germany, and you've had to build a company here, a team of over 60 people.
But all that what you just said, it comes from Ricardo Semler, right? I just try to apply his book here.
Okay.
And I teach that book or the case study of that book every semester here in the university. And every semester I get the same answers from the students. This is impossible in Bangladesh because we are like that. And I said, okay, look, in the corruption index of the world, here is Bangladesh, and more corrupt is higher, and here is Brazil.
Okay.
So don't tell me that, right? This is not true. It can be done. Have we managed? No, we haven't. But that may be because we poorly executed it. It's a constant fight. Now during Ramadan, right? We have something which we call the Sol Start, which is on Sunday and on Thursday at 10 a.m. Because 10 a.m. is officially our start, even though people come at the weirdest times, which sometimes I say, yeah, that's what I want, and sometimes it just freaks me out. So I'm living in these two hearts in the same chest kind of situation. Now Ramadan, the office has to start from 9 now.
Okay.
So should the Sol start at 9 or at 10? I said, of course at 9. And then everyone, no, come on. I said, at 10 is stupid. Then you come at 9. Then you think like, okay, should I start working or not? Because at 10 is anyway the Sol start. You engage in your other, and then everything is lost. Would Ricardo Semler bother about that? He wouldn't. He would say, let the people do what they want. So I got kind of also deeper ingrained here after 10 years, right? So I have two sides, two faces.
Yeah.
and it's hard. It's difficult, and I think it's also a natural progress. You start with come whatever you want, then you go to the fingerprint, and then you go, okay, well, whether you use the fingerprint or not, I don't care. You swing back and forth, and you try to find balance. But maybe balance is also then still stand, right? So you maybe the swinging is not too bad if it's not too much of a
too divergent.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears again, and I wanted to ask you about your academic career here.
Mm-hmm.
You've taught at North-South, you've taught at Eastern University. I think that's where you started.
Mm-hmm.
You taught at Independent University, and now you're working at Brack University. So could you tell me about why you started teaching? Because being a founder is a full-time job and then some, right?
Yes.
It's not because you had this time to spare, I think. Why did you start? What does it give you? And then, how has it been going?
Yeah. So I tend to say I always went one step up. So I started at Eastern, then IUB, then NSU, and then Brack.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to say that.
Someone in the comment section will pick on that, but okay.
No, so I felt like the biggest downside I have as a non-local founder is that I don't know the youth.
Okay.
So I said, okay, so what do I do? Then I had a PhD, right? So I said I might as well use it. And I knew that a foreign PhD, for some reason, the university would find that really cool.
Okay.
So then, okay, fine. So, but I didn't know how to get a job in a university. I lived in Bojandara, so NSU or IUB would have been the logical choice, but I didn't know anyone, and and again, I was an entrepreneur, I was a founder, I didn't take it too serious to really try and just walk up and say, hey. Also, I think it's very hard to actually enter those universities. But Eastern, I think I said someone that I want to teach and said, oh, I know the proctor there or whoever. And then I sent an email and they said, yeah, just come. And it was very interesting because it was for me the first time that, first of all, the students didn't understand me.
Okay.
My accent. So I learned how to speak. I'm not sure I'm applying this right now, but then I very consciously spoke slower and used different vocabulary so that everybody's, because you're not teaching for only the English medium school people at Eastern, you teach for all, right?
Right.
You need to bring them all over the finishing line ideally.
And what were you covering? What was the course?
There I started with very basic courses like macroeconomics, microeconomics, these standard courses, which, to be honest, in the Western world, you teach to 1,000 students because there are basic students where you teach them in what we call the Audimax, the biggest auditorium. And here with 30-40, it's actually quite small, even so we professors tend to complain about this, but we should complain for the more advanced courses, not for the basic ones. And then I wrote my first quiz and nobody passed, and I knew I'm doing something wrong in my communication. First of all, the quiz was unannounced. How dare you? And so I think it was, for me in the beginning, my only goal was to better understand the youth, to better be able to better communicate, and possibly even to attract talent. So our first intern was then obviously from Eastern University, and then later from IUB and from NSU and now from Brack, right? So it was also you could get access to talent there. But I realized very quickly that going from Bojandara to Dhanmondi by CNG almost ate up what they pay me. Yeah. Because I think, I shouldn't say that, but they didn't pay me a lot. Right. And it was quite expensive by CNG. Because buses was too far for me to figure that one out. I do short bus rides, but not that long. And CNG was expensive. And traffic and all these problems. So I did then manage to get into IUB. I can't recall exactly how. So then I was at IUB and then NSU. Yeah. NSU was an interesting story how I got in there. I applied to NSU a week before the Gulshan attack.
Okay. This was 2016.
Yes.
Okay. June 1st, right? Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
After the Gulshan attack, there was an exodus of foreigners. So when I went for my interview, I had the strongest arguments
resume,
in my
yeah.
pocket. I was one of the few foreigners who didn't flee the country. I had a foreign PhD, which NSU really needed in order for their it's one of their KPIs.
Right.
So I could negotiate really well. So I think I got a very good deal where I said, look, my focus is SOLShare. Just so we are clear. I can do that, and now we can negotiate based on that. If that's okay, then, and that went really well. And once you have such a contract, you can take it over to the next school.
Right.
That's how things went. Also, I stopped then teaching. Once I came to BRAC, I stopped teaching those basic. I taught basic maths at NSU, which was
boring.
Not boring necessarily, but
sorry, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. Yeah.
No, it made me realize. Probably we have the same problem in Germany, and I just don't know. But you basically teach A-levels maths, but you teach it to MBA students, and then you think like, didn't they do a test to get admitted, and
right? Shouldn't
you know what a derivative is if you
right.
Do an MBA? But apparently you don't need to, in order to pass the test. So it made me think about and then at BRAC I said, look, I don't want to teach these things anymore. I can add more value in a different course. And then something happened. COVID happened, and OSUN happened. OSUN is the Open Society University Network, a George Soros initiative, which was apparently good friends with Sir Ahmed, and BRAC University became a founding member of that network. That Open Society University Network started to teach courses, what they call network courses, where a bunch of universities together teach the same course. And so you would meet for a global class once a week, where maybe 5, 6, by now we are 10 universities would be in the same Zoom room, 100 students from 10 universities, from Palestine, from New York, from the Hudson Valley, from China, from Spain, you name it. We had students in exile from the Ukraine and things like that. Belarus and so forth. And then you would have a local session. And during COVID, I was allowed to do everything online. Now I do the local session once per week in the classroom, and the global class is still online. Would I have been allowed to teach that course if there wasn't COVID? Probably not. Who taught online back then, right? These were like these weird online universities which have not real value, and think twice. I think the education sector is anyway in for a disruption, and we see that, right? With the startups coming up here, and there I teach social entrepreneurship. So I teach what I do every day. I only teach very limited number of courses, so that my full-time, which is more than full-time job, is not suffering. But I have cross-pollination, right? And I think that's really good, and it's real fun.
Right.
Because
so what are the courses today?
It's so now I teach this course. I teach a course on the SDGs, social enterprise, together with Hunter Lovins, who is a legend. So those listening, just Google her name.
Hunter Lovins.
Hunter Lovins, that's Lovins, one of the co-founders of the Rocky Mountain Institute. She's a force. I teach social entrepreneurship with another startup founder. His startup is called Rebel Base, which is a platform to empower crores of people to solve tough problems and start companies. And this came now, my realization that when we talk about climate tech startups in Bangladesh, how many can you name?
Not a lot.
Exactly, this is a big problem. Again, Peter, Thiel competition is bad? I don't think so in this case. We need more climate tech startups in Bangladesh. And I realized with SOLShare, yes, we have this big ambition, we can buffer 20% of the grid, and that would be humongous, right? That would be boom. But it needs more than that. And it needs a lot more people. So can this platform, this Rebel Base and this course, can this help to launch more of those startups? And together with Sonia, with SPK, We started the net positive accelerator. We'll have a relaunch of that, which will be more powerful. Last week, a bunch of, I almost said kids, young, energetic guys came to my office and they built a lithium battery.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, we didn't dare to do that. And they did it. We're yet to test it. I would love to work with them.
Right.
But this is just one. We need we need an army of those guys.
This is why you should please do tell them how to stop a fire in case that happens. You won't tell me, but but that's incredible. Did you put out a call for people to come and build things?
Yes. So we haven't put it out yet. We will put it out.
Okay.
We are designing the
This
program.
is a good spot.
Yeah, but it's a little bit too early.
Under the wraps. Okay. Cool.
It's still I mean, we're working on it. We have designed the curriculum. It'll be again on Rebel base.
Okay.
We will get some funding for it so that we can give real prize money.
Okay.
Not $1,000 or $2,000. Real prize money.
Okay.
The funder, she was saying, when I said to her how much I want to give for the first 3, she said, maybe I should quit my job in this development organization and start a company. I said, exactly. And that's why we do it exactly that way. Because we need people like you not to be consultants. You need to do things. So I'm excited about that. That is a spin-off from the teaching into that. And it requires an ecosystem. And I do believe that climate change is the biggest threat humanity faces right now. And I don't believe that this is a thing the developed countries will solve.
Okay.
I think the destiny of all of us will be decided in the emerging economies. And Bangladesh is at the forefront of that, not only as a sufferer, but I think also can be as an innovator.
Why can emerging markets or emerging countries solve this better than, let's say, the developed world?
Same argument as before, that everybody in SOLShare has to be in Dhaka and not in Berlin or Tel Aviv or whatnot. So San Francisco. Closer to the problem, empathy, feeling it, experience it, solving it. But the challenge is, what if we miss it? What if this group hadn't come to my office?
Yeah.
I mean, not that I helped them yet, but I hope I can and we can work together. But what if we only look at the usual suspects? Tel Aviv, Berlin, San Francisco. Maybe the solutions we need don't come from there.
So when you landed here in 2014, there was really no one working on this problem, especially no one from abroad who was, trained in some respect, understood the problem, etc., etc. How has that changed? Has it changed 10 years later, roughly?
I think the biggest thing that changed is, I still don't think there's a word for startup in Bangla. That's one thing. I mean, at least a word which everybody would say, oh yeah. So it's still startup. But in 2014, startup was not good marriage material. Which meant every semester since I started teaching, I asked my students, what do you want to do? And I use this Mentimeter, and then I have this pre-selection, multinational company, bank, and all this stuff. And startup. First semester 0, second semester 1, out of 30-40, right? Usually MNC bank. That's the good, what I call marriage material, because that seems to be a driving force. This has changed. And you mentioned in our break that we managed to attract quite a few good people by now. How can you do that if someone has worked for 10-15 years in a well-respected corporate to give up all that, the Provident Fund and all these things,
benefits,
for something which is unknown, what is a startup? So I think this is for the whole startup ecosystem where we all benefit right now, given that we had a few, however you define success, but I think we do had a few success cases that brought startup on a map. And I'm not talking Bangladesh on a map internationally, that's all fine, but we also locally, people need to respect that this is a very legit career. And yes, it has certain instability, but the perks, the benefits from your exposure and what this can mean to you, and also that you start there and possibly you don't stay there forever, but you start your own thing. Like how many, I keep seeing this on LinkedIn, ex-Patao and now founder. This is what we need, right? So, but the question is this coincidental, or can we actively shape that, because I can't actively shape people leaving SOLShare and founding own companies. That would kind of, even so, Ricardo Semler in Maverick, he promotes that. I'm not that far yet, not stable that.
Yeah.
But in my other ambitions, can I co-shape and actively help support the ecosystem that eventually will also help SOLShare then? Because if these guys figure out the lithium battery, that helps me more than $1 million in investment.
So Sebastian, thank you so much for your time. I want to end with a couple of questions. One is, what does the future look like for SOLShare and Sebastian in the, let's say, next 2-3 years? What do things look like?
I think we just recently published this virtual power plant white paper, and I think if we can prove out that how we delineate the energy future of Bangladesh there, which essentially is, yes, more renewables, but also, yes, more storage, more flexible storage, more batteries. So if we can prove out that we can drive that energy transformation from a perspective of, I almost said a rickshaw wala, right? But an easy bike or a Mishuk driver, that would, for me, be another dream come true after this peer-to-peer thing. Because just the fact that we had built the first grid here and not in New York, it made really headlines, literally. And the engineers, where I said we couldn't build it anywhere else but here, they were so proud. So I want to have another breakthrough of that. And I think this could be it, or this will be it. The difference will be now we will have a lot more macro impact. So I think the key here is being able to buffer 20% of the grid is systemic. It's significant in the system. And that's going to be super cool. And if we can do that before any of the usual suspect countries who talk about this but then have 100 laws to not being able to do it or whatnot, or people to wane to do it, if we can get this here off the ground based on the local Teslas, I think that's a big thing. And I think in 2-3 years, let the policy come in, let the market further explode, let a few of the microfinance institutions we work with right now, let them finance that product as one of their core offerings, and this will explode. I mean, the MFIs in Bangladesh, let's say BRAC, they have 10 million customers, hundreds of thousands in the electric three-wheeler space, or Sachida Foundation, Grameen Shakti, IDF. These guys, if we get with them fully this on the rails, we'll have 10,000s, hundreds of thousands of vehicles with smart batteries we can remotely control. This will be so powerful. That's the future for SOLShare and for me.
Awesome. Couple of more generic questions. As we progress, it'll become more generic, just fair warning. In the last few years, are there any unusual habits that you've picked up? You seem like someone who does original thinking, so I'm guessing there might be some unusual habits that you have picked up along the way.
I'm changing habits, always in the pursuit of becoming better. But I've also come to realize that this continuous pursuit is also very putting yourself under unnecessary stress and pressure. And it can be very sobering. And we had the topic before that I didn't read any of those 3 books. It's because I did read a few, and first of all, it becomes repetitive, and secondly, I do not believe so much in recipes, including when it comes to cooking. Definitely don't use a recipe. And I would rather like to develop things what we call the SOLShare way. Obviously, these books give very good thinking, and you should continuously read. But I also don't believe in overdoing anything, and also with the habits, with improvement. It starts like you're flying tonight, right? When I see it, I sit and then I have first of all, should I read a book or should I watch a movie? Okay. All right, let's do a movie. It's calmer on the mind. Okay, which movie? oh yeah, I really want to watch this movie, but this movie, I think it's also on Netflix, so I can also watch it at home. So I don't watch that now. No, I should watch a movie which I only have access to. Oh my god, half an hour is over, I haven't even started the movie. So I think these habits are very self-defeating, and we shouldn't, I think what I need to teach myself, one, we shouldn't overthink.
Don't try to optimize everything.
Exact. Thank you. Thank you.
I should make a t-shirt.
On point.
Don't optimize everything.
Economists want to optimize, right? Everything needs to be Pareto efficient and
right.
stuff.
Okay, out of a very generic question, I got a very profound answer. That's I'll call that a win. Another generic one, which is there a quote or a maxim that you live your life by? This will be the last question, but I just want to ask you any quotes or anything that comes to your mind, anything you abide by?
Not something I would put on a
billboard.
Postcard,
Yeah.
like a short thing, because again, I think this will always cut it short. But there's definitely an intrinsic conviction that this concept of net positive, it makes a lot of sense. Can you, and that usually sounds very corny, right? But can you make things better? And while doing that, not intentionally or intentionally make other things worse. This is very easily put, but I think it's very complicated at the end of the day. And can I instill that value in people that doing good doesn't mean that you lose out on something else? And I mean, we have all the proof for this, right? If you, I don't know if you've ever heard about McAskill, this young philosopher. He was called out by Elon Musk, and since then he has become close to very, very prominent. He did his PhD on the impact of, and we're in the month of Ramadan, of donating things. And so, how many taka do I lose? And how much happiness do I win? And how do I balance it? And the research is very, very clear on that. You hardly ever regret it.
Okay.
Yet we're finding it so hard to do, right? So how can I, not that I want everyone to donate things, but it's a thing of this giving spirit. If you think back, we hardly ever regret it. So why don't we do more? So I think if that
it's counterintuitive to some degree, but
it's counterintuitive to some degree. It gives you something back. And I think the more real it becomes, the more empathetic and not just doing a transaction.
Yeah.
The less transactional it becomes, the better.
Thank you so much for your time, Sebastian. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.